which sucked. The pandemic ate my job. But it was just like, it was the weirdest thing because it was like, I moved down here and it was immediately fair season. And then I had like 6 months to breathe and then it was fair season again. So it was like, at some point I like forgot to make friends. It's like, I don't have any friends to live.
So you just imported a friend.
I know, so I just imported a friend from California. It was faster.
So we're still about 5 minutes out.
Hello, Twitch. Fun fact, did you know that everybody on Twitch is just a very stylish and cool person? They are the coolest, most stylish people of taste, refinement. And also, if everybody on Twitch wanted to go follow me at twitch.tv/CatieOsaurus, but the O is a 0 because somebody is camping on CatieOsaurus, I wouldn't be mad.
Yeah, if you want to go follow me on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/HeyGoon, but it's just spelled like this because, professional. So.
Oh, they got me right in my face. Oh, man.
No, that's not.
No, it was right. Oh, it's right here. I was gonna lose my mind. I was like, I just saw it. It's the most ADHD thing I've ever heard. Okay, cool. Thanks, Charles.
Oh, really? Katie learned. That's
I know. Imagine.
Yeah. Well, she's just done so many things. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. All right. I gotta. Oh, he knows a bunch of people that I have. It's a
vast.
It is. It's a vast network of cool guys and cool folks. I don't know what that was. It's the dumbest joke I've ever said.
Oh, we can really look for it.
Like, don't mess it up.
Hi, everybody. We haven't started yet.
I'm trying to finish a TikTok. It's not going well. No.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon. Turn us to thousands, and we'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon. Turn us to thousands.
Hi, everybody.
We'll go through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays.
I think we should get ready.
Hardly always be a little bit bad at it.
Oh, I don't have to.
Alright, you got 1 minute.
Well, that's enough time to watch TikTok. That's enough time to.
You're like, I'll just watch one TikTok, and then half an hour later, we're like, oh yeah, the panel.
That's how we've been.
Such a mood.
Enough time to cook certain microwavable products.
Like what? Ramen. You can't know this takes like 3 minutes. Hello, welcome to our microwave food panel. Alright, this one. Doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. We're not gonna mess this up this time. You ready?
You're gonna crush this.
Hi everybody, welcome to Life of Players Handbook.
Yay! Thanks.
The delay is like, oh, it's Sunday morning at DragonCon. Cool. Hey, everybody, before we begin, we just wanted to remind you that DragonCon's official charity for 2021 is Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta. So this year, DragonCon will match dollar for dollar up to $100,000 every dollar raised by us for this wonderful charity. So if you're interested in donating, you can donate via your phone by texting Mentor to 243725. I always get really scared when I read the numbers because they look like Z's. Cool. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being at Life of Players Handbook. I'm CatieOsaurus.
And I'm HeyGoon.
And we're Infinite Quest.
All right, we're working on
We
that.
finally did it. It's a historic moment. So, first and foremost, we just want to let you know that we named this panel very badly. Would you like
I want
to
to
explain?
clarify. I named this panel very badly. Well, we were trying to think of the concept for this panel, and we knew what we wanted it to be about. We knew what we wanted to talk about, and we just got way too thinky about the name. You know, we had like lists and lists, and finally, I like had this. I felt like I was such a good writer at the moment. So, what about life: a player's handbook?
He did say colon out loud. It was weird.
It was like 2 a.m. We were like, "That's amazing!
It's amazing.
Send the email." And now we're like, how are people going to know what this panel is actually about?
So what this panel is about is basically taking the lessons that we learn at the gaming table as gamers and applying them to real life. How we learn and grow as players and how that can sometimes both positively and negatively affect us in the real world.
Yeah, I think I certainly struggle with sometimes in gaming, I'll know what to do in a gaming setting, in a D&D setting or a card game or a LARPing setting. Where I'll know how to solve a problem or approach a problem. Or if I don't know how to solve the problem, I know how to approach it in such a way that, you know, me and my party can get through. But when I encounter similar problems in life, I think sometimes we fumble. When if we were to approach that problem in a gaming setting, because if it's a game, it just hits different neurons. It hits our brains differently, and we can solve them. And if we could translate some of those lessons of how we approach games to life, we might be able to get more out of life in the same way that we get things out of gaming.
Yeah. And I think it's important to clarify as we have this conversation. For those of you who don't know, Erik and I have a podcast. It's called Catie and Erik's Infinite Quest. And we talk about neurodivergency. We talk about living life with ADHD and depression and sort of navigating life as neurodivergent adults. But somewhere along the way, we started playing Dungeons and Dragons because it's an ADHD podcast and we do what we want. And what we realized was that there was a really interesting conversation to be had about neurodivergency and the challenges therein when you are gaming. And I also want to clarify just right off the bat, when we say gaming, we tend to speak more towards like Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games, that kind of thing. But I think these conversations are applicable to all gamers, whether you're, you know, a streamer or a D&D-er or just like a home, you know, kitchen table board game.
Poker player.
Once again, shout out to Betrayal at House on the Hill, the greatest game ever made. Because there's always something to be learned and there's always something, and especially in conversation with our experiences as two people with neurodivergencies, those challenges can be a little bit more difficult and a little bit more tricky to navigate. So, Erik, we wrote notes because we're very professional. So what are things that you run into in gaming that are difficult?
Well, I think...
I said that question so weird.
It's like it was going to be a list. I just thought of a bunch of memes and I was going to do a bunch of meme references, but I was like, no, Erik. But I think in a gaming setting, I have, because of my ADHD, I have problems with when there are many different components to a problem. I'll think of one component and then I'll kind of figure that one out. And then when I switch to think of the next one, all of my understanding of that first one dissipates. And in D&D or in, again, any game, because somehow, for some reason, by nature of it being a game, I'm all right with that. I forgive myself. And I go, okay, how are we going to get through this? They agree. They clearly agree. How are we going to get through this door? How are we going to defeat this enemy? How are we going to convince this NPC to give us the MacGuffin? But again, in real life, when I have those same struggles, I get furious at myself and I lose sleep and my heart rate increases. So when I first started, my background is in LARPing. I've been LARPing since I was 12 years old. When I first started LARPing, which is a sort of a cool middle zone between, I guess, D&D and real life, and then it's very much like D&D, but it's your physical body. So you are the one physically taking the actions. I encountered much of those same struggles as a 12-year-old when I was trying to convince an NPC of something or trying to solve a puzzle. All of those real-life angers and frustrations would come up. And learning to quell those in a LARPing setting and think of myself as this other character somehow allowed me to solve those problems more, I want to say gracefully, and I mean that literally, in a more forgiving way. Forgiving of myself, I mean. So in gaming, a lot of memory issues specifically come up for me. One of my favorite card games is Boss Monster. Amazing game if you haven't played it. They just came up with a whole bunch of expansions. It's great. But I'll sit and I have my hand, and one of my favorite things to do is think of the most efficient play, the best way of playing cards in sequence, the best mathematical way of playing this hand. That's I get a lot of satisfaction out of doing that. That being said, I'm terrible at it. I'll sit and I'll figure out the best sequence of playing these cards in Boss Monster. It's room placement. But then I'll forget them immediately and I'll have to start over again. A sound will happen or a door will close or a smell will occur and I'll forget everything and I will have to start over again. And a lot of people get frustrated with me because I take a long time to play. I mean, you should see me play chess. My gosh. So those memory-related things are extremely difficult for me, both in a gaming setting and in a life setting. Another one is anything that requires note-taking. It's very difficult for me because I think 10 times faster than I write. And so as I'm writing something, by the time I've finished writing the first word, I'm already way past myself and I've forgotten. So I experience a lot of those problems. Particularly, again, both in life and in gaming. And I find the ways that I'm willing to forgive myself for encountering those problems in gaming, but not always in life is an interesting little game that I'm playing with myself at all times. Well, we play a lot of games together, and I think you're a better note taker than me. I don't know. I think we sort of pass off, but what sort of problems do you encounter?
Oh, I'm way better at taking notes.
You are.
But it's funny because that's honestly that's one of the places that I always start the conversation is because our neurodivergencies show up differently. Mm-hmm. Like you tend to be more hyperactive and I tend to be more introverted, inattentive. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so for me, a lot of my challenges come from my perfectionism and my burnt out gifted kid syndrome and that kind of thing. Because for me, I'm really worried about getting it right, about doing the right thing. And that does show up in my life too. I'm often I was literally just making a TikTok about choice paralysis because I get completely overwhelmed. I get completely sort of hung up on, I have to take perfect notes. So, but if I'm focusing on taking perfect notes, then I'm not listening to what the DM said, and if I'm listening to what the DM says, then I'm forgetting to write stuff down. I really struggle with sort of that shift in focus and that shift in attention. But at the same time, I'm also excellent at multitasking in real life. And I know we're going to talk about this later, but I think that is one of those skills that I've sort of picked up along the way. It's you can take, messier notes. The notes don't have to be perfect right off the bat. Haha. They're so good. I just please observe just the glory. We have bullet points.
Something is circled.
We have a circle. We have an arrow. We have 2 arrows. They're very fancy notes. But things like that, I tend to get really hung up on being the best and being the most right. And I think that is because for many, many years, and this is where I'm going to bring the room down a little bit in a conversation about neurodivergency. But for a really long time, I harbored a lot of shame and I harbored a lot of guilt and I felt really bad about the fact that I couldn't do things that I saw the other people in my life doing. And I had all of these experiences where I would get in trouble for not paying attention or I would get in trouble for losing my homework or that kind of thing. And so I always felt a lot of shame and guilt in that sort of area. And so I was okay, well then I have to be right. I have to be perfect. I have to burn myself out with this attempt to be the most perfect person all the time. And it turns out, this may shock all of you, that's not really healthy. That's not a thing that you're supposed to do. That's not good for you. So you talked a little bit about those the difficulties and that kind of thing, but how do they show up in life specifically?
Well, I guess
life is the answer. Life happens.
Just all of life happens. Well, I think in game, I mean, I also want to bring up just sort of what those things feel like in a gaming setting. When I encounter those frustrations where the specific shittinesses of my brain show up in a gaming setting and how that feels versus how that feels in my real life. Because in a gaming setting, if I my ADHD is very chaotic in a lot of ways. I'm very hyperactive. I just want to say the thing. I just want to do the thing. I want to introduce the idea that I just had. And sort of calming that in my real life, especially throughout childhood, was always, for some reason, the goal for me. It was always to shut up a little more. It was always to try to be, if the strong, silent type, rather than the entertaining, class clowny type. So I had an immense amount, and still do have an immense amount of shame about that in real life. And then in a gaming setting, I started off much the same way. I didn't want to disturb the universe. I didn't want to. I felt the urge to. That's all I wanted to do. But I internalized the idea that was wrong. And so when we played our first game together, I remember when Chris, our DM, first set the scene in the tavern with the bell tower going. He's a wonderful DM. It was a beautiful scene. All I felt was fear. All I felt was, how long is it going to be until I royally fuck this up? How long is it going to be until I kill the person I wasn't supposed to kill, or I take the thing I wasn't supposed to take? I wanted to do the right thing, because for some reason, to me, I had it in my head that there's a correct way to do this. And if you don't, I'm going to ruin the experience for everybody else. And because I know I always do this at panels, but because you and Chris are just such loving, accepting, and patient people, I started to peek my head out of that and going, well, okay, what if I do start introducing the weird random things? Slowly at first, hopefully. I don't know. It was probably much faster than I thought. But what if I do start allowing that part of me that I felt so much shame about for so long? What if I started letting that come to the table as well? What if I stopped trying to hide that, under the stairs or whatever? Shout out Harry Potter. He's watching. What if I did that? And it worked out all right.
Would you like to tell the story of the time that you thought unicorns could talk?
Sure.
And here's why. Why I like telling the story at panels is because you were so hung up on doing the right thing for so long. But the minute that you deviated, the minute that you sort of were like, you know what? We're Leroy Jenkins. And you did that, you irrevocably changed the game in a way that made it so much better and so much stronger, and is one of the reasons why we have found success in D&D podcasting, is because of that choice that you made. So now, with that huge caveat and stress pressure on you, please tell the story about the time you yelled at a unicorn.
So for one, my character is a half-orc barbarian.
One day you'll get it.
I know. I'm trying. I'm working on it. And he's a very lovable guy. He's not too smart, but
I brought two. Okay, I saw a bunch of people just start laughing. Listen, I came prepared.
But he's very naive. I could talk about Blunkin forever because it's a hilarious name, I guess. Well, I don't mean to say that it's hilarious, but I really like that character. He's whimsical and naive. But we met a unicorn in our quest, and Chris, our DM, had painted this scene of this beautiful, he really painted it really well, this beautiful clearing in the woods, and there's light coming through the trees, and this majestic unicorn, raises its head and is chewing on grass with its horn, glistening in the whatever. And we have this moment of whatever, and by the time we are almost about to decide how to approach this noble beast, that was the one I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna play this goddamn game. I'm going. My character takes off, just bounds towards it, runs up, and Chris is like, what? The unicorn looks up and gazes at you with, I think it was thoughtful, pensive eyes or something like that.
DMing so hard,
just what is about to happen here? And I run up and I lift up its ear and I go, what's your name? And Chris goes the unicorn shakes up, because he doesn't want to this unicorn could kill my character immediately, so he's handling it, but I don't let up. I just keep yelling and yelling, Helvetica, it's her character. I don't know, he's not saying, what is your name? And then finally he goes, Tony! The unicorn turns to the side and yells, Tony, what's your name? And I go, Blunkin. And so all of a sudden, unicorns can talk. And Chris has to figure out how to put that into our world.
And not only can unicorns talk, but then that unicorn became one of the most important NPCs and is a major part of the story.
Yeah, Tony the Unicorn ends up being a huge plot point. That's funny.
Spoilers.
Excuse me. Spoilers. Season 1 of the Quest. But Just a gesture to we spent a lot of money. This is one of the nicest
very
things
fancy
we own.
tablecloth.
But Chris had to figure out how to work that into the game, and God bless him, he's an amazing DM and storyteller. So he did, and that, I won't spoil anything in case you want to listen, but that bred this larger universe that only came from the chaos that I forgave myself for allowing to happen in that moment. And I by no means mean to like credit myself for that, because by nature of gaming, and we'll talk about this a little later, it's inherently a communal thing. You have a team around you. So none of this was any one person. But by allowing myself to bring this thing to the table that I had been so long ashamed of, it enhanced the universe, enriched the experience of those around us. This doesn't mean to say that every crazy idea that I have is going to be a game changer. But I certainly wasn't gaining anything by being ashamed of it and hiding it. And that shame is something that I feel every goddamn day of my life. And I'm learning. I don't want to say I have learned, because I don't feel like I've arrived anywhere. I don't think anybody ever does. I think it's a constant learning thing to accept and love ourselves. But by allowing myself to not be I didn't get rid of the shame, but I wasn't afraid of the shame in that moment. And by allowing myself to be vulnerable and bring a part of me that I often hide, we were able to create this wonderful thing together. And there's just no way that there isn't something to gain from doing that in real life as well. I'm convinced of that. And I think it's very hard. I think it's much easier in a gaming setting for some reason to take things less seriously, to not think this next choice is going to change the course of the rest of my life. What should I major in? Should I take this class? What time should I get up this morning? What time should I eat dinner today? Those choices, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but for me, certainly feel like they're life and death. The rest of my life is going to play out differently based on this choice that I make, which sometimes it does. I mean, when you messaged me for the first time, I responded. I cannot think about what my life would be like if I hadn't. But I lost it. I got it. AUC is a real thing. Excuse me. And I think there's like a switch that gets flipped in a gaming setting where it's less serious and I allow myself to forgive myself. And learning how to flip that switch, if only occasionally in real life, is quickly becoming a life's journey of mine. And we're lucky enough to be in a position to be able to talk about it in front of people. So anyways, what does it feel like to you to experience?
I'm sorry, I was so distracted. I was like, what?
It happens really easily.
What was the what?
It's really, well, what does it feel like to you when you're having those moments of you want to do the right thing? You want to be the correct version. What does it feel like on a sensory level? What does it feel like in a gaming setting? And do you feel those feelings in real life and in what settings?
Oh, man. I mean, I think I feel this has been a very interesting year of my life. And I feel a lot of fear about like doing the right thing and like saying the right thing and like being the right sort of player for the game that we're trying to play for D&D. And so I mean, I think for me, a lot of it comes down to, hold on, I had it and then I lost it. I caught you're losting it. Oh, it comes down to like a very much like an insecurity. I think sometimes is like, because I know that, sometimes I'm going to make content that really hits. And sometimes I'm going to make content that TikTok goes, no, not today. No. No one will see this video. And I go, okay, that's fine. But so the insecurity that I feel a lot of times stems from like this idea that I was very hung up on, that there is like a correct answer. There is like this definitive right way to do things. And so the feelings wheel, if you will, of that is sort of a combination of like fear of choosing the wrong thing, insecurity in, well, what if I look foolish in choosing the wrong thing? And then, like a nice little buffet of insecurity and like almost embarrassment, because like I'm really able to like sort of meta look at myself, and I can look at myself in a moment where I am very anxious, or I am very like insecure or something like that, and I go, this is so silly, like why are you being insecure? Just talk to the unicorn, just do this. Like nobody is gonna get you in trouble. But I still sort of live in this place where I'm like, I'm gonna get in trouble, I'm gonna like do something wrong, and the D&D police are going to show up at my door and say, no, you didn't roll that initiative correctly. And so, yeah, so for me, like that's a lot of it is navigating that sort of feeling of insecurity and like that need to appear to have your life together. And I feel like that sort of like appearances thing is something that a lot of people experience in real life. This idea that you have to do your job a certain way, or you have to, organize your house a certain way, or your house has to even look a certain way. And we put so much pressure on ourselves to look a certain way and do things a certain way, when in reality, like the way that I do my laundry is perfectly fine, unless you look on Pinterest, and then it's very, very wrong, But there is no such thing as perfect. There is no such thing as like exactly perfectly correct, because everybody is bringing a different range of experiences and a different background and a different, like mentality to whatever it is, be it D&D, be it, gaming, Twitch streaming, doing the laundry, whatever. It's all based on that person and their needs and their wants.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I love having these conversations, because it's like, there isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Like, if that's the one thing that anybody takes away, is like, you do not have to be perfect.
Well, I think you said something that, like, I forgot every other note that I had taken. You just said
we went like hard right. Like we were doing really good, and then I was like, tell the Tony story, and now we're completely off track.
ADHD podcast, baby. That's what it is. But you said, and I think you meant this literally in terms of like our D&D campaign. You said, I'm constantly worried that I'm the right player for the game that we're playing.
Which is like, there's two of us playing D&D. I'm pretty sure that I'm okay, well, but I worry all the time.
I mean, I'm going to take that and just zoom it out way big, like Tony Stark in The Thing. Whoosh.
Wow.
Shout out Iron Man 2. But that's what I'm worried about all the time, is whether I am the right player for the game that we're playing, whether I am the right person to be in the world that we live in. And I never feel that way. I feel like an imposter every second of every day. I feel, to paraphrase Stephen Fry, he said, I think we all sort of feel that before we were born, there was a class in which how to be a person was taught, and we slept in that day, and everybody else went. There was no fucking class. Nobody really knows what they're doing. We're just trying to be okay and not hurt other people, hopefully. And I think my journey, and I suspect yours, in D&D, particularly this D&D campaign that we're playing together, because it means a lot to me, is I worry if I'm the right player for that game in the same way that you do. And that insecurity is the same insecurity that I feel being here, being in this room with you all now, waking up in the morning and Twitch streaming and whatnot. Am I the right player for this game that I'm playing? Who the fuck cares? So that's the ultimate answer, is who cares and who's to say? There's an infinite amount of games to be playing, an infinite amount of sets of rules, and you get to figure out what game you want to play. And you get to find out what kind of player you are. And I think that's where the rub is you have to figure out what kind of player you are, what kind of person you are, and not try to be the correct player for this whatever game. Figure out what kind of player you are, what person you are, and what game suits that. Knowing yourself. I mean, knowing yourself is a constant journey, of course. What games would you like to play? What games do you want to play with your time here? And I think that's a question that, when I ask myself that question of, am I the right player for this game in a D&D setting, it's a very difficult question to answer, but it's less serious to me, because I'm talking about a character named fucking Blumpkin, who's a half-orc who collects shiny rocks. I can disinterest myself from him enough to wonder if he's a good character, and in some ways objectively think that. But when it's me, like, I'm my father's son. I'm Carl Good's son and Dorsey Good's son, and I'm Erik Good, and I'm the partner. I'm this person. I'm this fucking, like, I care so much about what people think of me and what I think of me that it's really hard. Well,
remember that time that you doxed yourself at a Dragon Con panel?
Oh, my full name is fucking everywhere. I don't know. But when we're applying that logic to ourselves, suddenly it's much more personal. It's much harder to forgive. And I brought this up at the Neurodivergency and Gaming panel yesterday, but I think one of the most important things to remember when you're at a gaming table is to have grace, is to be graceful, is to be very quick to forgive. other people for sure, but far most importantly, to being able to forgive yourself easily. And I can forgive my character easily, but I cannot forgive myself easily. Hopefully I can forgive myself more easily than I could 5 years ago. I hope I'm improving. But I think that's the journey on, is forgiving ourselves and allowing ourselves to be the player that we are, and not concern ourselves with what the right player is, because there's no such thing. Anyways. But I on a much more practical level, when I encounter a game, and when one encounters a problem in a game that we know how to play, that we like, the solutions to those problems are often, they become intuitive. If you're in D&D and you're encountering a problem, if you encounter a room with puzzles and shit in or whatever, and you need to solve the problem, you think, what can I do? What are my skills? What do I have on me? What skills do the people around me have? What does my team have? What can we do together to collaboratively solve this problem? But in real life, it's really hard to remember that you have a team. It's really hard to remember that you have skills and that you're good at stuff. Like, for example, for me, emails, I can't look. Sending one email is like a week-long task for me. Like, I have to psych myself up for it, to like look at myself in the mirror and be like, you got this. Like, and then even still at the very end, I'm like, sincerely, dearly, I don't know. But I can totally take 10 hours of raw audio and lock myself in a room and try to crank out something worth listening to. And so that's sort of how this works, is I do that kind of thing and you send the emails, much like a D&D squad would, a D&D party would. Blumpkin is big and strong and smashy. He's got a big axe. He's charismatic and charming, and people don't want to hurt him, so he can hurt them first. Helvetica is very smart, and she's talky, and she can convince people of things. She's very practical. She remembers to bring the items and whatnot. And together, we are Infinite Quest, Blumpkin and Helvetica. And I think it's hard to remember in real life that we have a team.
I also just like that we're absolutely playing ourselves in D&D.
Oh, shit. Oh, no.
Oh, no. So here's the thing. You were saying a lot of very many smart things. But how do you start? How do you take the leap? How do you take the leap between, all right, I know that in D&D I can rely on my team. I know that in board games I'm excellent at solving problems or solving puzzles. You know, like I love escape rooms. I'm the anagram person on our escape room team. Like I don't do anything else. I just look around and go, haha, letters. All right. And I like, that's my special skill that I bring to the team. But how do you take those skills and those lessons and apply them to the idea that, like, you know, being a barbarian is great in D&D, but you can't go around smashing stuff if you get, you know, if you're having a bad day. So like, how do you take those lessons in a way that makes it sort of like applicable to life? I'm going to just ask you the same question 7 times in a row.
Oh, hush now.
And no one will notice.
Well, I think
it's going to be great.
Well, I'm not glad you said it, because I don't like when you're mean to yourself, but that is a pertinent point. I think a lot of things, but I think first we need to stop being so goddamn mean to ourselves all the time. I think that's step one. And that's not something that we complete. That's not something that we like complete. That's not like something that we fill out a worksheet and suddenly we're not so pissed off at ourselves all the time. Excuse me. Oh, it's bad today. Sorry. Thank you. I don't think that's something that we complete doing. I think that's something we need to remind ourselves of constantly. Well, not constantly, frequently. But we start by doing that. We start by forgiving ourselves, not being so mean to ourselves. And then I think we stop taking things so seriously. Like, what's really going to happen if you eat the wrong sandwich or something like that? You know, what's really going to happen? Like, this is your life. This is your one life. What are you going to do? There's stuff to do. There's salmon to eat and mountains to climb and trees to whatever and days to sleep in on and whatnot. Like, you can do those things. This is your life. Do whatever the hell you want. Like, don't hurt other people. But, like, do what you want. There's a lot of cool stuff to do. And I think I forget that all the time because I'm so concerned with being the perfect player for whatever the fuck game is I'm trying to play or aspiring to play. And I think I can't even get started on trying to figure out, I couldn't even get started on trying to figure out who I am and what I really want until I stopped realizing that the world isn't going to end if I mess something up. people aren't going to die if I mess something up because I'm not a doctor. But like, we can take things less seriously, and it's still okay. Have some fun, because ultimately I think that's sort of the goal when you sit down at a gaming table, is ultimately to have the time that you spend playing this game. Again, I know we're talking about D&D, but any game, cards, poker, boss monster, checkers, what's the game where they're the little yellow pieces
Tetris.
and there's
Pac-Man.
Sure, Pac-Man, thank you.
Mario Brothers.
Any game that you're playing. The whole point is that you're just trying to have that time be well spent. You want it to just be, whether you enjoy it in a haha funny way or in a crying cathartic way, just having it be time well spent. And I think in life, we are trained to want certain outcomes, financial success or respect from our peers and whatnot. And if we don't get those outcomes in very measurable, peer-reviewed ways, then we've failed. And that's just not fucking true. This is all a game, and we just want to have it be time well spent, hanging out with friends, laughing, writing stuff, cooking meals, whatever the hell your thing is, it doesn't matter. Just time well spent.
Yeah.
And I think I've noticed, if you don't mind me saying this, I've noticed that after we started playing D&D together, I think you forgive yourself a little bit more.
I was literally just about to say that.
Really? Do you think that's related?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and I talked about this at every panel they let me talk about at, because I think it's so important. But one of the biggest lessons that I have learned is being able to ask for what I need, validating my needs, validating my wants, because the thing, if you're playing Catan and you need, I don't even know how that game plays because I played it once and it was the worst day of my life. But if you need more wood or something, or if you need, Park Place in Monopoly, or you need a rope in D&D, you can just turn to somebody at the table and say, like, hey man, do you have a park? I'll do you a deal, my friend. And that's totally fine. And that's totally acceptable. And I remember very specifically, there was a game of D&D that I was playing with a group of people who I really didn't fit in with. We didn't really mesh. I wasn't having my needs as a player met, and I was not having a good time. And at some point I realized, but like in the game, my character needed, I think it was like it doesn't matter. She needed something. And I looked at the person and I was like, hey, can I have this thing? And they were like, sure. And then the problem was solved and we moved on, whatever. But I was still not having any fun in this moment of like that. I was like, well, why is it so easy for my character to say, oh, can I have a hammer? Or, if I'm playing a board game, like, oh, I need the extra pieces or whatever. But why can't I do that same thing for me? Why can't I look at the DM or the other players and say, like, I need to take a break, or like, I need to, knit at the table or something like that? Like, why am I so afraid to assert myself and assert my needs? And for me, it all came back to that sort of like the grace that I wasn't giving myself, and the insecurity, and like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if the need that I'm asking for is incorrect? And I'm like, that's not a thing, because it's like, even if I ask for something and then it's like, oh, well, actually that didn't work, you can just ask for the next thing. That's it. That's all. You can just ask for the next thing. But being able to validate the asking, because especially for a lot of neurodivergent people, asking for what you need can be really challenging because of the sort of like, I don't want to say like trauma, but the sort of memories we carry of like being told that we're wrong and incorrect and not doing it the right way, and like we're not like everybody else. That can really impact your ability to ask for what you need and articulate your wants in a way that makes them feel, or that allows you to honor them and allows them to feel, valid. And so if my character can ask for a rope, Kate can ask for a break. If Helvetica can, I don't know, fireball her enemies, I can say, actually, no, I would like to be called Kate, not Katie, like that kind of thing. And that was genuinely, it was a really sort of powerful experience when I started noticing all of the places where I was downplaying my own needs and downplaying my own wants, but I wasn't doing it at the table. I wasn't doing it in the places where I felt safe and I felt secure. I was like, oh, well, nothing bad happened to you here. The lady at Starbucks probably won't get mad if you say Kate, it's weird how that happens.
Have there been times when you've seen another player? I mean, more particularly in a game, when you've seen another player struggle to.
We've locked the doors. You're trapped.
Has there ever been a time when you've seen another player struggle to ask for what they need, or struggle to realize that they have something to offer too? And how did you feel towards that player? And what would you tell players that experience that?
I'm going to ask you this. Do you mind if I profoundly call you out in front of all of these nice people?
Yes. I mean, no, I don't mind. Yes, you
can. Because you are one of the best. You are genuinely one of the best stories that I have to tell. Because I've played a lot of D&D in my life, and but you were really interesting because you came to it as a LARPer. You came to it as a gifted sort of like improviser, storytelling person, but you just didn't know the mechanics. And the mechanics in D&D can be complicated. But I watched you be fearful. I watched you be nervous. I watched you sort of like create and like instantaneously, I might add, out of nowhere, created this like fully realized character, which takes so much skill and so much talent. And you did that, and you did that really, really well. But then, come to combat, and you would just go, because you were worried about the dice rolls, or you're worried about whatever. And so, I forgot the second part of the question.
Oh, well, just what I guess you started talking about me, so now I'm just in flattery mode. But what advice would you have? I suppose.
Oh,
probably a more elegant way of asking that question.
The advice that I have is what I did with you. So my advice for anybody who might be looking to support their players or their friends or their real life relationships is offer them compassion and offer them kindness and offer them grace, because you didn't know shit about combat roles, and it would be a little bit annoying, in terms of you're like, oh, which dice and whatever, but you don't know. It's not your fault for not knowing. None of us are born knowing how to play D&D. And so getting mad or getting frustrated or getting annoyed is just counterintuitive to the goal that we are trying to have, which is tell a good story, have some fun, make a podcast, that kind of thing. Mm. So for me, what I've learned through all of this, this whole weird year of our life, is that at the end of the day, compassion and kindness and grace for the people around you can often be the most powerful gift that you can give somebody. Because maybe, one of your friends struggles with communicating their wants, or maybe your partner, struggles with forgetting birthdays because of their ADHD or whatever. But approaching it with compassion and kindness and grace, the same way that, you would support somebody who doesn't know the rules of the game. Settlers of Catan is really hard, you guys. And so supporting your friends through those, and in that moment, it's just an exercise in compassion. It's just an exercise in kindness, and in a way that is, I think, a microcosm of how truly good we can be to each other in moments in real life when somebody is struggling or not having their needs met or not feeling heard or seen or valid. Because that's the hill that I will die on, is that you are valid and you deserve to be seen and you deserve to be heard. But sometimes you might not know the rules. Sometimes you might not know the best way to do it. Sometimes you might not know the most efficient way to ask for what you need or whatever. And so you need somebody to teach you the rules. And I think one of the biggest honors genuinely of my life has been teaching you the rules of D&D, because we got to create something extraordinary together. But out of teaching you D&D, I got to learn about you as a person and know you on a different level. And I love you very much. And that's cool, but we can do that for anybody. We can do that to the, lady at Starbucks who gets our name wrong. It doesn't matter. She's trying her best. Be kind, be compassionate, that kind of thing.
Mm. Something that I say sometimes to sign off of a stream or an episode that you make fun of me for a little bit, but I think it's in fun. I think is one of life's greatest struggles and greatest journeys is affording ourselves the same love, compassion, and grace that we so easily afford others. Because if I'm at a gaming table and I see a person who is hesitant to become involved, who hesitates to dare to disturb the universe, and who is hesitant to take any action because they're worried they're going to roll the wrong dice, or they're going to do some math wrong or something like that. All I feel towards that person is compassion.
Yeah.
I want to if they consent, of course, I'll grab their hand and say hey, dude, it's going to be okay. We're on this together, man. Do whichever you want. We're here for you. We're here to help you learn and grow. And I think so often when we are that person, we look at ourselves and go, you piece of shit. How dare you, whatever. But when it's somebody else, I just love them. And that doesn't make any sense because we are people too, and I think it's very important that we treat ourselves with the same love and compassion. And I think for me, gaming has very much been an exercise in that, and in having forgiveness and compassion for myself in the same way that I try to have compassion and forgiveness in other people. And thank you for being on that journey with me.
I just did finger guns. That was the worst. That was I was nailed it. So we have about 15, 20-ish minutes left. And so we wanted to give y'all the opportunity to ask questions or make comments or whatever. The only thing is that if you would like to, you need to line up at that microphone because otherwise the kind people on Twitch can't hear you. So if you have questions, you can ask them. And if you don't, we'll look at each other awkwardly for a while. And it's okay. I mean, we can also keep talking. That is fine. But we just wanted to let you guys know that that was an option. If you, we have questions.
Hey-o.
It's so exciting.
Hello.
So one thing that I've found that have you guys ever just rolled a d20 just to see before you do something, you roll a d20 and whatever it is you take it, and if it's good, then you kind of already have you've appealed to a higher power, you have a boost of confidence, it's going to go well. And that tends to give you an extra push. And if it doesn't, if you get a low roll, it's okay because you get to roll that dice again, because at the end of the day you have more rolls in front of you and you can say, well, I'm going to do better this time, and hey, you may increase your modifier. So that's the rolling of the d20 is mostly what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's what I think you hit on something really, really good is there's always another role, and I think that with very limited circumstances, most of the choices that we make on a day-to-day basis are not necessarily life or death. If I roll a nat 1 on getting my laundry done because, my executive dysfunction is off the charts bad that day, or I'm having a really bad depressive episode or something, it can feel like that is the only role that you're ever going to roll. You're going to only, you're constantly rolling nat 1s, but then all of a sudden, the next day you wake up and you go, oh, today I rolled a 4, and the day after that I rolled an 11, and things can get better, and sometimes you roll, 5 dice in a row and there's an 18 and a 4 and a 20 and a 1. You're like, well, ADHD. But yeah, no, I love that. That's a really great analogy.
Oh, yeah. And I think there's always an extra role, particularly with ADHD, which isn't technically a topic of conversation in this panel, but it impacts every part of my life. So it's just around. It's really easy for us to not remember that there's an extra role because we tend to have a terrible working understanding of the passing of time. And so when I'm doing laundry, not only if I roll a nat 1 am I about to do the laundry poorly, but I'm going to be doing the laundry poorly forever till the end of time. And so remembering that there's always another role. I love that. I'm going to remember that. There's always another role. Unless you're flying a plane. You should probably practice flying a plane first.
Yeah, right here.
Okay. First, I wanted to say that thank you, because I've learned more about my executive dysfunction from your TikToks than about 30 years worth of being treated for ADHD has taught me.
Well, thank you.
That's it's been immensely helpful in my day-to-day. And I don't think I ever personally heard the story of where you got started, and just a lot of this information is stuff that it makes so much sense to me hearing it. And I'd never heard, none of the doctors I've ever went to brought up anything about rejection sensitivity or, blindness to the passage of time or any of that.
Yeah. So how did I get my start on that? Yeah. I mean, honestly, so how I got diagnosed with ADHD is a long and complicated story. But basically what happened was I got diagnosed with ADHD the day before my 30th birthday. Happy birthday to me. And then I remember, like, I was reading something. I don't even remember what I was reading, but they talked about, they're like, yeah, you know, how people with ADHD are more predisposed to eating disorders. And I went, what? Because I have struggled with bulimia my entire, like, adult life. And so I looked up that. And then out of that article, I read something else. And then I read something else. And then what happened was, and I'm just going to get really honest, I got angry. I got so angry because I was like, the conversation about ADHD is still one about like little kids messing around in the back of the classroom. And I say that a lot. But what I realized is that like a lot of people, especially people like me, who were high achieving in school and didn't necessarily struggle in the conventional ways, like my ADHD like has dramatically impacted so many facets of my life. And then when I learned about like, you know, sexual dysfunction and depression and anxiety and all of these different things, I was like, why isn't any of this shit in the brochure? Like what? And so yeah, so I mean, it literally just I rage learned is basically the answer because I just got so frustrated. And so yeah, like that is my answer. Is I got mad because I didn't see myself represented in the research that was being presented, so I just did my own. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Catherine.
Same.
I thought your panel was super great. My career is being a mental health therapist, and I think some of the things that were discussed, like the importance of self-love, compassion, and finding ways of transferring from the game table to real life is so interesting. And that makes me think about some more of the benefits of, as a therapist, to bring that to the therapy room. But I think my main question is just if there was anything you both wanted to know or wanted therapists to know about the mental, like kind of your experience or anything that would be good for therapists to know.
Oh, that's an amazing question.
I mean,
what would we want a therapist to know?
Yeah. I mean, right off the bat, you may already do this, but this is a very practical one, but having fidget toys around. A friend of ours who's a therapist, Alessandro Lopez on TikTok, following me, he's fantastic. He, since it's COVID, and I think he's just now getting back into his office, he can't have like reusable fidget toys like he has been for years, and so he keeps a bowl of paper clips and like blank business cards for his clients to come in and they can use. And that's like, I think that's brilliant. I know that's not like a grand awesome, but that's a very practical one. I've gone into therapist's office for like session 0 and just never came back because it was just like a blank coffee table. And it's not, I could find something to fidget with, but I think it shows a level of like eye to eye understanding of like, I know you're here to talk about what's going on inside your head, but I also know that you have immediate needs to be able to be comfortable. So it's a very welcoming thing to do, aside from the practical impact of the person having something to fidget with. That's a very practical advice, but
my answer is darker than yours. Now I feel bad.
I got a dark one brewing.
My answer would be that I think one of the most important things to know, especially about people like me who have like a late diagnosis, is that not only are we having conversations about like managing the symptoms and managing the stress of like, oh my God, I have ADHD and like, what do I do? Whatever. There is probably, I don't speak for the group, but I speak for myself, years and years and years of feeling like everybody else can do this, but not me. Like there must be something wrong with me. And so I think as a therapist and like a mental health professional, you have an incredible opportunity to start the conversation with, you are not broken. You are not a bad person. This is not a moral failing. The fact that you cannot do these things or you struggle to do these things or you do them in a different way is not a commentary on your goodness or badness as a person. Now, you might also be a jerk, but the executive dysfunction and all of the sort of like resultant things, like it is not a commentary on your ability to be a person. You are just a different type of person. And I think starting the conversation there opens a lot of doors in terms of like unpacking that trauma and really starting a path of acceptance and self-love.
Yeah.
That is my answer.
Thank you. I think that brings into a whole other interesting conversation that we don't have time for probably, but that I've seen a lot of adults coming in recently that have ADHD symptoms going on, but it's always been diagnosed as anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And really looking at that and playing into, okay, this may be going on, but what are the strengths of neurodivergency and all of that too? So,
Yeah.
I also, since you said that often adults will come in with ADHD symptoms that gets diagnosed as something else, this isn't necessarily just for therapists, but something I desperately just want everybody to know, is how a person behaves and what they say and the amount of eye contact they make or whatever. Those measurements, I guess, that we take when we are with somebody. There are just a living fuck ton of reasons that can be the case. And I think a lot of ADHD symptoms look like anxiety symptoms. For example, sometimes I struggle with eye contact, but that's very different for reasons that I've heard that other people struggle with eye contact. I struggle with eye contact because I need to press the dopamine button or else my levels drop too low and I start to freak out and feel like I'm going to die. So I need to look at this and then that and then this and then that and then this so that I can keep listening to you, not because I'm not. And so I think constantly being aware that there's likely something underneath the thing, which, I mean, you're a trained therapist. I'm not, so I don't mean to tell you that you don't already know. But just constantly keeping that in mind in every realm of what somebody's saying.
Sure.
And that there's a number of reasons why that might be the case.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Catherine. We have a last question.
Great name.
Great name.
Afternoon. So I'm a behavior therapist that specializes working with autistic kids.
Oh, cool.
So I have kids ranging from young to adult. And there's not a lot of literature on how Dungeons and Dragons can be used to teach social skills, and so that's what we're about to do in my company.
Sweet.
So a non-aversive way to do it. So my question is, because we're going to be working with our older clients to lower age clients, how do I help or create an environment where those lessons can be used in the real world?
Oh, I love that question with all of my heart and all of my soul. And then I'm immediately going to go blank. Such a big one. I have so many thoughts. It's really the
my
thing.
My job is like, you do Dungeons and Dragons. Can we pay you to do it? I'm like, twist my arm.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I think honestly, so my husband is autistic and he is our DM. And I watch him sometimes struggle with like our ADHD nonsense because he's like, but the narrative, And so I think like my biggest suggestion, I have a million suggestions, but like the biggest one is to frame whatever is happening in the D&D game in such a way that like the real world applications become sort of immediately apparent, right? So like if you're DMing, you have the sort of power to create the world and the narrative like in the way that you want, right? So what that means is, if you have a kid who struggles with, I don't know, communication of their needs or their wants, set them up with a challenge where they have to ask the magic mirror for something that they themselves want. Or, if they struggle with interpersonal communication, like ordering food at the grocery store or whatever, have the characters go to the market and meet somebody at the bank or, whatever, and have those little moments where they can role play and they can, sort of like feel it out for themselves in a very safe and confined way. And then at the end of the game, reinforce it and say, hey, you did such an awesome job at the bank today. Did you know that that's pretty much the exact conversation that you can have at the real bank?
Yeah.
Like that really helps because like I work with kids too. I did a lot of like theater stuff and kids are always surprised to find out that like, oh, if I do this in a play, I can also do this in real life to feel more confident. Like if I stand like this on stage, I feel like a superhero. If I do this in real life, it makes me feel more confident. And so I think, like, obviously you're a behavioral therapist, you know more than me, but that would be my suggestion is give them a microcosm of like the larger issue and then reinforce it with how great they did in the game.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. One more. I'm sorry, I didn't let you talk on that
Oh
one.
no,
I got excited.
That was an excellent answer. no notes.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh.
You guys touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'd love to hear more about the things each of you do around the table to like keep your focus, taking things of that nature, just to keep your flow going. Are there any little tricks or things that you always try and have handy to make it easier for yourselves?
I love that question. Erik, you want to go first?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, especially since I have hyperactive type ADHD, or predominantly hyperactive type ADHD. Just having fidget things. I know I bring that. I feel like I always give that answer to just every question, but it's such an important part of my life to just have a thing. So first, just that, paper clips, a thing, fidget toys, anything like that. Two is, Katie and I sort of did this, without having to discuss it because of our rhythms just sort of lined up. But being able to take breaks and having sort of an agreement with the people around you of how to sort of handle them. So I guess with Katie and me, for example, after 25 minutes or so, I need to get up and walk around and grab a drink of water and touch the grass or something. And then I come back and Katie just goes, this person died, but we need to get this. And then when Katie takes a break, I come back and I go, this person's back to life and we got the thing and now it's this other thing. And so having sort of systems in place for making sure that you can get the things that you need while still maintaining not disturbing other people's gameplay, and having those conversations that allow you to do that. So I would say breaks, fidgety things, trying to boil down what the essential pieces of information that you need are. Because I know when I first started playing, I was writing everything down. I was drawing maps. I was writing down the names of everybody we met in the tavern, and I was writing down the things that were on the table, which if that's the kind of player you are, awesome, do that. But for me, that was just way too much for me. And so I had to slowly realize, okay, I want to remember names. I want to remember place names. And I want to remember like, the item, the location of the item or something like that. And so I guess reducing your amount of responsibilities in terms of like note taking and what the standards that you're holding yourself to, finding that level of fastidiousness, I guess, that is right for you at the table. And that took me, I think, a couple sessions.
Snacks. Thank you for coming. No, I think we have time for one more question, and then we got to wrap it up. So, what is your fine question, my friend?
So you talked a lot about like having compassion and grace for yourself and other people around you. I was wondering, how do you find a balance between like when you're trying really hard to have grace for yourself in like real life, and you're learning to do that because you struggled with it, but then you come into contact with other people who don't give you that grace. And then so you have this dissonance between you're trying to explain to them, I have to give myself this.
Yeah.
But then they don't agree. Like they have an entirely different mentality. They're like, no, this is actually how I live my life. Like I don't give myself grace. Is basically what they're saying.
Yeah.
But they're not saying that explicitly. They're just like, I don't do that for myself, so I'm not going to do that for you. And like that dissonance.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a balance of like, I want to do this correctly, but also I need to take care of myself because I know I'm not going to always do it correctly.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. And obviously it's very nuanced. But I think one of the things that a situation like that affords us is an exercise in compassion. Because meeting a person who cannot afford themselves the grace and compassion to treat you with kindness and compassion, like, you ever get cut off by somebody like in Atlanta traffic and you're like, what a dick, right? But maybe that guy's wife is having a baby, or maybe there's a medical emergency, or maybe he's on his way to like a great job interview and he's running late because his iron broke, or I don't know, whatever, right? But I think in those moments, like, you have an opportunity to teach by example and say, I understand that you cannot give yourself the grace and you don't understand why I need this, but that's coming from a place of your needs are not being met. And like, you are not in a place where like you feel safe and comfortable asking for the things that you need. So I'm going to model what I need and I'm going to model my behavior and that kind of thing. And also I know that this is going to sound kind of rude, but also sometimes that becomes a conversation of, do you need those people in your life? Because I stopped playing D&D with people who couldn't meet my needs. I stopped being in relationships with people who couldn't meet my needs. And I think sometimes those are very hard conversations. But one of the hardest parts about personal growth and personal expansion and becoming, more sort of fully actualized is that sometimes you realize that the people that you have in your life are people who are contributing to the problem. and aren't necessarily meeting you where you are anymore. And that's why personal growth can be so scary. And that's why personal growth can be so tough, because sometimes you have those moments of like, oh my gosh, like I don't get along with these friends anymore because these friends are not good for me. They don't offer me the grace. They don't offer me the kindness. They don't offer me compassion. And I think that can be really challenging. But I would say my sort of like short-winded answer is compassion for those people above all things. Yeah. Do we have, I don't know if we're over time. I'm so sorry. But yeah, we're going to be out in the lobby for a little bit. If y'all want to say hi, I know you wanted to do a thing, but I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I like you so much. But hey, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful to all of you for being here, and to Dragon Con for hosting us. I've been CatieOsaurus.
And I continue to be Higu.
And we are
Infinite Quest. Thanks. No, it's totally fine. I was just trying to see that you knew I was like,
oh, okay.
So I wasn't like,
oh, I thought you were like angry.
No,
You're like, you really
no, it was
idiot.
just so you knew. Like, oh, we don't have time. It's okay.
All right, let's
Yeah,
take down our
good,
table
good,
pod. Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Great shirt, by the way. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great shirt.
You said something about conversation. Kind of rang in my head, like,
About scheduling
from the other
you
side.
guys
So my cousin's ADHD next year.
Okay.
That's like, very common. Or like,
swearing
for example, they're like, what are we talking about?
That's
right.
I'll
You're not
let
fucking
Erik
listening.
go.
Right? So, what would you say to somebody on the other side?
Rather
than make it so
I mean, in short, I mean,
we'd rather schedule it.
That's
just
fine.
FYI.
Also,
Yeah.
we're happy to take that note.
Well,
so we told us
I
it.
think
So
like short answer
we didn't know that.
Short answer
But yeah,
is
no, that's
I'm not
totally
looking
fine.
away because I'm not giving this. I'm looking away
I
so
absolutely
that I
meant,
can.
like,
Yes, and
I would definitely short
I definitely understand.
Uh-huh.
I've
and
done a lot of it.
I got
Dating regular levels.
all the way through
Right.
college, made a first attempt at a career before ever realizing what certain parts of my executive function were